In the weeks and months following the school shooting of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High in Parkland, Florida last year, many survivors channeled their grief and fear into activism. And while some went on to start the March for Our Lives movement, which calls for greater gun control, 18-year-old Kyle Kashuv's advocacy looked a little different.
I'm here for one very simple reason. I don't want to see this ever happen again. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and it really concerned me as to how come we did not see
you would have
person.
liked more armed guards at the school.
Absolutely.
Kashuv went on to write an admissions essay to Harvard College about school safety and the Second Amendment. He was accepted and was planning to start next year. But then Harvard officials saw past comments of his posted online by one of his classmates, which included the repeated use of the N-word and other racist and offensive commentary. When Harvard contacted Kashuv asking for an explanation, he did apologize, writing, "I take full responsibility for the idiotic and hurtful things I wrote 2 years ago. I'm not trying to excuse him. Instead, I'm seeking to demonstrate the hurtful things I said do not represent the man I am today," adding, "I will hope to enter Harvard as a more mature member of the community with 3 years and many life experiences between the foolish child who said those things 2 years ago." One of those experiences, of course, was the massacre at Parkland. But the university's admissions committee revoked his acceptance anyway, stating the committee takes seriously the qualities of maturity and moral character. Joining me to discuss are Michael Curry. Michael's former president of the Boston NAACP, now chair of the National NAACP Advocacy and Policy Committee. Hello again, Michael. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Tina Opie is an associate professor of management at Babson College. Tina, it's great to see you too. You know, my original reaction was racist language. I read the thing on the Huffington Post. Hateful context. Harvard's decision was a no-brainer. Let's move on. Was I and was Harvard too quick to make a final decision here, Tina?
I don't think so.
Why?
I mean, because I actually think, this was 2 years ago. I talked to my 16-year-old son about this.
Which is what he was when he posted these things. Yeah.
And he admitted, and I know from first-hand accounts, that 16-year-olds make stupid decisions. However, there are certain things that my 16-year-old, and I hope other 16-year-olds know, making sexist language as he did, which wasn't discussed, making racist language, saying kill the Jews, and he said that it was a joke, that they were trying to be as inflammatory as possible, as extreme and as inflammatory as possible. But I think we have to send a message, one, that that's not okay. Two, we also have to think about the students who would have been in class with him, who would have heard about that language and then have to deal with that.
So does that mean that no college should accept this young man? Forget Harvard's just one, but your rule, for lack of a better expression, I would assume applies to every university.
Well, what I would say is I would like to see some contrition, because while he said that he was sorry, if you read the entire statement, it sounds, and then if you think about subsequent actions that he's taken, it sounds as though he's actually trying to blame Harvard. He's trying to blame other people and say that this is a political ploy. I want him to take full accountability, and then perhaps, I believe in restorative justice.
I know you do.
So perhaps once he has truly repented and taken action, maybe then we can consider.
I want to get to those further comments you mentioned a minute ago, but first, Michael, are you with her on this?
I'm with her. I think, one, I did not find his apology compelling. I thought it was deflecting, both mentioning Harvard, his conservatism. This was a targeting of him as a conservative young man. That was troubling to me, and I think ultimately it's not Harvard's job to mature him.
Yes.
He should enter Harvard, and I used to work in admissions at a college. Character matters, and it is really a school's decision that they are within their rights to make, that you're not qualified for their school based on your character.
It seems to me that what both of you are saying is not that under all circumstances was Harvard right, but they were right not because of only his original sins, but because of his lack of remorse as far as you see it.
Absolutely.
So can I read into that? If he had acted more responsibly and more remorseful post these comments when he was 16, you might feel differently?
I think it's a totality of the circumstances. What happens on college campuses, they review these cases, and they sit down and look at the original incident, and it's not like a court standard beyond a reasonable doubt.
Of course,
they're actually looking at it, and in the totality, they say, we don't think there's enough here for us to admit him within our student body. I'm sure that work was done at Harvard. And just to answer that original question, there are other schools who can make a different decision, and I think that's fair.
Why is it fair?
A school's decision to determine whether, based on their morals, their standards, whether you fit their culture, and that is a standard.
But Tina just said the issue is not just the school. The issue is the other students. There are going to be other students at whatever school he's admitted to. So why is that kind of person who neither of you consider to be remorseful and who admits he said what he said at less than 2 years ago, why should that be acceptable in any setting until he shows him, well, when I get his response first,
Okay, go ahead.
what's the answer to that?
Again, I think it's really a call by the institution. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
And whether it's a sexual harassment case or a discrimination case, schools make different decisions, and they may evaluate him differently. I'm just saying it was within Harvard's right to deny him access based on his behavior.
You know, before you continue, I want to read, because you've referenced this, in a series of tweets yesterday, Kashuv called out Harvard, saying if anyone should understand growth and change, it should be Harvard, meaning growth and change in him, it should be Harvard. Throughout its history, Harvard's faculty has included slave owners, segregationists, bigots, and anti-Semites. If Harvard is suggesting that growth is impossible and that our past defines our future, then Harvard is an inherently racist institution, but I don't believe that. You know, that is not a way to change someone. But you know what's worse, which neither of you mentioned, which I was sort of surprised. Maybe you were referencing it. One of his apology tweets, he said this, and see if you picked up what I did. These offensive comments that former classmates and I made, we were 16 years old when we made these idiotic comments. I'll tell you what struck me here. It's not about your classmates. It's not about we. It's about you.
Absolutely.
You're the one who is in the crosshairs
It's
here.
a deflection.
And is that the deflection you're talking about before?
It is a deflection.
Yeah.
And again, it's a disturbing case by this young man to sort of blame the other students.
Yes.
It's even actually disturbing to me. We don't talk about that. He's Jewish.
Yes.
So his comments about Jews was disturbing as well, but we kind of talk about that internalized racism thing, and that even applies here.
There's sexism in it, too, by the way. Talking about a woman who's only interested in blank jocks.
Yeah, I mean, the thing when he was talking about Jewish people, it was very concerning to me. And he said, look, I am Jewish, and my parents are Jewish, so of course I didn't mean that. I've heard that argument so many times. And the thing that we need to recognize, and I hope he learns, your words have power.
Absolutely.
You know, I didn't know there'd be such unanimity here, so I want to move on. And I want to say, you know, you've been here a lot lately with your buddy Jen Dedrick.
Yes,
about Me
Jen.
Too stuff, starting immediately after Weinstein in October a couple of years ago and since. And the three of us have talked a lot about, do you get a life sentence? I'm not, by the way, Harvey Weinstein should get a life sentence. I don't mean the Weinsteins. I mean the Kashuvs of the world. Maybe Louis C.K., and I'm sure got angry. You know, people who have not committed murder or rape.
There's a spectrum.
There's a spectrum.
Governor
exactly.
Of Virginia, Northam.
So what's that?
Yeah.
Governor of Virginia, Northam.
Well, he hasn't gone anywhere, has he?
Exactly.
Or nor the Attorney General, nor the Lieutenant
DeSantis.
But where do you go? I mean, let's assume that this young man says, now that this is resolved, I do want to show remorse. I do want to change my life. If you do it in a vacuum somewhere and nobody notices, then did it really happen? Where do you go to try to show that whether you're a Me Too perp or whether you're this kid, that I really am a changed person?
Right. I'm forgetting the name of this classmate who put some of his tweets online.
Either, yeah.
Okay. I think you go to the people who were offended and affronted by you back in high school. I think you do it quietly initially. You figure out, okay, I'm sorry. You apologize. You own it, and then you ask them, how can I make this right? What can I do? Is it contributing money to the NAACP? Right. Is it taking Black Lives Matter classes? What is it that you think would make me whole? I want to do those things, and then over time, perhaps those students will see a change in you and even be willing to speak on your behalf. Absolutely. This is a changed person. I will put an addendum in your admissions letter.
But some of those kids turned him in, by the way.
Right.
So that's but that's exactly right.
That's what they do.
And the 15 seconds of fame that he's had over school safety, transition that into anti-Semitism and addressing that issue and racism. I would love to see him in the next year or two be as outspoken as he was on school safety on these issues as well.
You know, I don't mean to take this to a ridiculous extreme, and maybe it isn't, but should we have in local communities forums for restorative justice? So that, I mean, you know, by the way, when I was a 16-year-old kid, if I did something horrible, and I hope I did nothing even close, I don't think I would have known what to have done. I hope my mother would have provided some guidance, but I don't know. And so I would have liked to have been able, and I bet you, I don't know about this kid, I'm sure there are other misbehaving 16-year-olds who would like to know where to go and what. I mean, is that a ridiculous idea that we have those kinds?
No, I think there's a conversation we have about restorative justice. None of us are perfect, right? We know that prejudice, any of us can be prejudiced, and any of us can make comments, and any of us can make mistakes. However, I don't think there's a false equivalence here. What he put into that Google exchange, that email exchange, whatever it was was much more egregious than that. It was hateful.
It was hateful.
It wasn't a slip of the tongue, a stereotype. We have to differentiate the two of those. Let's have conversations about restorative justice in the community. Let's talk about what racism is, because the critical part of this is nobody seems to really understand what racism is. Therefore, we look for the most egregious examples of it like this, when in fact, I'm more worried about whether you didn't hire somebody, whether you're not providing us equal care, whether we're not getting housing, whether we're not getting an equitable education. I'd like us to pivot from this and start talking about those broader issues.
It's very helpful. You have 10 seconds. I'm sorry.
Well, it's funny. Where do people go? I'm going to be doing some of this research in my local community, where I'm going to be inviting specifically black and white women and women of color together to learn how to talk about these issues in the workplace.
I bet we'll be talking about that.
I hope so.
Tina Opie and Michael Curry, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for your thoughts.